All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are now going to talk about the quarterbacks that changed teams this offseason and who has the most to prove on their new team, on their new squad. So we're going to talk about the main ones. We'll talk about Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Sam Darnold, and Russell Wilson. Now, for me, I think the quarterback that has the most to prove is Sam Darnold. I think that's without question. I think of the four guys that I just named, he's the one that has the most to prove because he's coming off of his best statistical season. He's coming off of a season where the team he played for had 14 wins. You had the coach of the year behind you. You had the best receiver in the league. You know, you had a good number two. TJ Hawkinson came back late. You were backed by a very good defense. The Vikings were a very good team in 2024, but unfortunately the season fell flat because you had, the finish, the regular season finale against the Lions where you could have locked up the 1 seed, and they ended up losing that game, and then you lose in the wild card round against the Rams, and Sam Darnold was not good in those games. He wasn't. Now, the offensive line was an issue, but it doesn't go without putting the blame on him as well. He just did not. When he got sacked a bunch of times, not all of them were his fault. Did hold on to the ball too long at times, but yeah, it was. Look, it was a team effort, right? So, yeah, but Darnold does get, the blame because he is the quarterback. So now he goes to a team in the Seahawks, and the Seahawks had a very interesting offseason because, they traded Geno Smith, and that opened up the opportunity for Sam Darnold to sign there. And the Seahawks did craft the contract in a way that, if Darnold doesn't play well up to par, then they could, end up, letting him go. So it's a 3-year deal, $100.5 million. But in reality, it's a 1-year, $37.5 million deal with the team held option for 2026 and 2027. So yeah, if Darnold is not good, he's gone after 1 year. But I think this is, he's got a lot to prove here because now, you're going to a team that's not as good as the one you were on previously, not as loaded. You go from Kevin O'Connell to now Mike McDonald, who, look, the Seahawks won 10 games last year in his first season. So, you're not going to have Kevin O'Connell there. And I will say, though, the division is a bit weaker. It's not as loaded as the NFC North, and we'll talk about the NFC North later in the show when we do our post-free agency rankings. But he has a lot to prove. And Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp, those are your top 2 targets. Now, I don't think that's bad. I think that's solid. I don't think it's as good as what he had over in Minnesota. But you have those 2 guys combined with the running game of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. I mean, that's good. The one thing is, and this has been a problem for the Seahawks in recent years, and it was a problem for the Vikings towards the end of the year, especially on the interior, is the offensive line. The offensive line could be a problem. And like I said, we saw towards the end of the year, those last 2 games that the Vikings played, the offensive line could not hold up. Couldn't. And if Darnold is under pressure a lot, it's not going to work. He's got to be protected. He's a quarterback that really cannot deal with constant pressure. Can't do it. But you know what? Not a lot of quarterbacks can. I mean, we saw the best of the best in the Super Bowl have basically no protection and couldn't do anything really, for most of that game until garbage time. So I think out of the quarterbacks that have changed teams, he's the one that has the most to prove. Because of the season he's coming off of, can he repeat that in a lesser situation? Now, again, it's not like he went to a team that's in a full-on rebuild. They've reloaded, but they've kind of moved laterally. I mean, I like what they've done. I like the Cooper Kupp move, and I do think Darnold is, in my opinion, a bit of an upgrade over Geno Smith at this point. So, we'll see. And I like that they added DeMarcus Lawrence to the defensive line. The Seahawks defense is good. And Mike McDonald is a defensive-minded head coach. But the offense, I'm curious to see how it plays out. So Sam Darnold is one of those guys. And then for the other quarterbacks, I mean, I think the one that has the least to prove is Geno Smith, in my opinion. I know he was given a 2-year extension. But, with Geno Smith, he's now in his mid-30s. I think we know what he is at this point. Geno Smith was brought in to help win games. I don't think they're looking at... To me, Geno Smith is not, even with the extension, Geno Smith is not going to take the Raiders to the promised land. He's not going to. But what Pete Carroll and this new regime want is to win games right now. And Geno Smith, bringing him in, he can win you games. I think the Raiders can win more games next year with him at quarterback and with Pete Carroll as the head coach. The problem is they play in such a tough division, and there's still more work that needs to be done. This is a team that really needs to do well with the draft. They have to. So they could be, so you get best player available with your first pick, whatever. Fill out the holes that you can, the best you can. But yeah, Geno Smith, with the extension, look, again, we know what he is at this point. Now, look, I mean, the Seahawks got rid of him. So, that is a chip on his shoulder. Like, hey, you got rid of me. I'm going to show you that you made a mistake, bringing in Sam Darnold. But I would say he has the least. He's the quarterback that has to prove it the least. Now, I think Russell Wilson would be number 2 behind Darnold. This is now going to be his 3rd team in 3 years. And now you're paired up with Brian Daboll. And when Brian Daboll first got to the Giants, it was all about, hey, he's a quarterback whisperer. And, the first year with Daniel Jones, hey, they got to the playoffs. They won a playoff game. Daniel Jones played great in that playoff game, although it was against a bad defense at the time. But then everything, the last 2 years, it has not been good. Has not been good. And look, we saw Drew Lock have one of the best games a quarterback has had for the Giants in a long time. And Brian Daboll at the end of the game, this was against the Colts, at the end of the game said that's what happens when you have good quarterback play. And look, Russ has kind of fallen off. Well, not kind of. He has fallen off since his days in Seattle. He has. And it all started in Denver. I was one of those people that was very high on Denver when he got traded there. But I think there was more issues besides the quarterback position. Coaching was, I think, the main thing. And you could point to the very first game that Russ had with Denver against the Seahawks where, Nathaniel Hackett was not using his timeouts towards the end there. But, yeah, Russ was not good. Then he was a little bit better his second year with with Sean Payton. But Sean Payton didn't want him. Sean Payton benched him. And then with the Steelers, he got off to a good start, but then the Steelers lost 5 games in a row. So I think Russ can still play, but he can't play at the the level that he did in Seattle. I mean, we know that at this point. But if he doesn't do well with the Giants, then what's the future for him as a backup? Does he want that? So he's really gonna. If Russell Wilson goes out there and him and Brian Dable have a great relationship, and Russ has his best year since his days in Seattle, and the Giants actually win some games, he's bought himself more time as a starter. But I think if he goes out there and he does not play well, I don't know who else is gonna give him a chance to be a starting quarterback unless you're super desperate for it. For one. I mean, he visited with the Browns. Could it be, like last year, he visits with the Giants, but then he signs with the Steelers. This year, he goes back to the Giants, and they sign him. Yeah, well, he visited with the Browns beforehand. Could it be a scenario where next year he goes to the Browns? I don't know. But I would say he's second. And then Justin Fields, I would say, is third. The Jets really like Justin Fields. Look, the Bears, we got to see, what he could do a little bit. But, and then, with the Steelers, I thought at times he looked good. But, I think he's still limited with what he can do. But yeah, I think he does have something to prove with the Jets. The Jets are giving him an opportunity to start. Supposedly they really like him. And, there's nobody. Tyrod Taylor is there, but, he's there as a backup. Justin Fields is a starter. And this Jets offense is going to be different than what we saw last year. You got a mobile quarterback now. And they're going to be probably a run-first team. They got several running backs on the roster. You got Justin Fields who can run with it as well. And they're going to utilize that. And then, mix in some passes to Garrett Wilson. Let's see. Let's see what happens. But, this could also be, for Justin Fields, his last shot to be a starter. I think for him, he had to end up in the right situation. The Bears was not a great situation for him. The Steelers was, but, then they benched him for Russ. I would have liked to have seen what he could have did over the course of a full season as a Steelers starter, but we didn't get to see that. But now he's with the Jets. And look, the Jets could turn out to be a good situation. And I know some people will probably laugh at me saying that, but it's just because of the current regime. Now, if this current regime, they talk the talk, but now are they going to be able to walk the walk? If they could do that, then this could turn out to be a good situation for Fields. If not, then, I don't know what's going to happen there. But bottom line is this. Russell Wilson. Well, Russell Wilson, yes, has the second most. But Sam Darnold, to me, is the quarterback that has the most to prove. In my opinion. Because I think we know what Russell Wilson is at this point. But, this could be his last opportunity to be a starter. For Fields, I don't think there's... now he's in New York, playing in New York, so there's pressure. But, I don't think the expectations are super high. And then for Geno Smith, he's in his mid-30s. The Raiders just want to win games right now to be competitive. And then, eventually they'll have to find their long-term answer at quarterback. But that's just how I look at it. Sam Darnold, to me, has the most to prove in 2025 out of the quarterbacks that have changed teams. Now, Aaron Rodgers still hasn't signed yet. Had he signed, he would have been included in this. But because he hasn't signed yet, I decided not to include him. So let me know what you guys think. What quarterback that changed teams this offseason has the most to prove? Let me know in the comments. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again, to tip or donate, get your comments recognized, make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat. If you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast, makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, We will continue talking about the NFL. We will talk about the regimes, the current regimes that are on the hot seat going into 2025. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.